The year was 1872, and the frontier air had a way of biting deep, as if it meant to remind a man that he was never welcome for long. Ethan Cole sat tall in the saddle, sweat darkening the rim of his hat, his shirt clinging to his back despite the autumn chill, riding low through the canyon winds. He had ridden 3 days without rest, trailing cattle that had slipped from his herd during the last storm. Cattle meant money. Money meant survival. And Ethan knew survival wasn't something a man gambled with on the edge of the New Mexico territory. The horse beneath him snorted restless, its hooves crunching over dry brush and scattered stone. Before him stretched a land unlike the open plains he knew, narrow canyons, cliffs blood-red against the sinking sun, and markings in the rock that seemed less carved by wind and more carved by memory. Ethan slowed, uneasy, though he did not yet know why. The land was still. No hawk circled. No rabbit stirred. The silence pressed on his chest like a hell breath. He swung down from the saddle, crouched low, and brushed dust from faint hoof prints. The tracks curved to a rise of stone etched with strange spirals. He frowned. The cattle would not have chosen this path. His gut told him the trail was wrong, but he was too far gone to turn back. He tugged on the reins, urging the horse forward. The canyon narrowed, its walls drawing tight like jaws. Shadows stretched long across the sand as the sun dipped lower. He thought of his ranch, lonely acres carved by his hands, haunted by the memory of a wife buried too young. He thought of why he had come west in the first place, to make something that would last, to stake a claim against the wild. But standing there, hemmed in by cliffs that seemed to watch him, Ethan felt smaller than he had in years. The sound reached him first, like the creak of a bowstring, taut and sharp in the silence. He froze, hands sliding toward the revolver on his hip. A single voice broke the still air. "Leave this place." Ethan turned, slow, and saw her. She stood upon a ledge above, framed by the last light of the setting sun. Her bow was drawn, the arrow trained steady at his chest. The breeze lifted strands of her dark hair, braided through with beads and feathers that caught the dying light. Her stance was still as stone, her gaze harder than flint. "Easy now," Ethan said, his voice calm low, as though speaking to a spooked horse. "I mean no harm." The arrow did not waver. "You ride on ground not meant for you," she answered. Her English was sharp, laced with an accent that carried the cadence of wind through canyon walls. "You should turn back." Ethan swallowed, his throat dry as the dust around him. He raised one hand from his side, palm out, though he did not step away. "I'm trailing strays. Didn't know this land was sacred," she cut in. The word struck like a stone cast in still water. Something shifted above the cliffs, shadows moving where there had been none. Ethan felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down, though no other figure stepped into view. The woman drew the bowstring tighter, and in that moment Ethan knew the choice before him was not his to make. Ethan's hand hovered near his revolver, though his instincts screamed not to draw. He had faced gunmen before, desperate men in saloons or outlaws on the trail, but this was different. The bow was silent, the woman silent, and it felt like the whole canyon held its breath with her. "I told you," he said evenly. "I mean no disrespect. I'll ride out the way I came." Her eyes narrowed. Too late for that. From the corner of his sight, movement flickered. 2 more shadows emerged atop the cliffs, warriors, silent as wolves. Their spears angled downward, though they did not descend. Their presence was enough to pin Ethan where he stood. "You cross where you should not have," the woman said, her voice steady, without anger but edged with iron. "The land remembers every step. It does not forgive." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I came by mistake. Just looking for cattle. That's all." She tilted her head, studying him as if measuring his words against the beat of the wind. "Your mistake could cost you your life." The horse shifted nervously, tugging the reins from Ethan's grip. Dust swirled around his boots. His patience frayed, pride rising in his chest. He had not worked years to carve a ranch out of nothing, just to be treated like some trespasser with no name. "I've got no quarrel with you or your people," he said, his voice harder now. "But I won't be spoken like a thief on ground I bled to reach." The woman's gaze flashed, her bowstring creaked tighter. For a heartbeat Ethan thought she might loose the arrow then and there. But instead, she lowered the bow a fraction, not enough to ease the threat, only enough to show she had chosen restraint. "You will come," she said, motioning with her chin deeper into the canyon. "Our chief will decide if you live." Ethan felt heat rise in his chest. He didn't take kindly to being herded like cattle, but he also knew the odds. A single move of defiance, and he would be a corpse in the dust before he could clear leather. Slowly, he nodded. "Lead the way." The woman descended the ledge with the grace of someone born to the stone. Up close, her presence was sharper still. Paint streaked across her cheekbones, the steady flame in her eyes, the quiet authority that did not falter. She walked ahead, the bow lowered but always near. Ethan followed, every step heavy with unease. His heart beat steady, but loud in his ears. The canyon twisted, shadows deepening as they walked. He thought again of his wife's grave on the ranch hill, of the promise he had made at her graveside, to endure, to hold the land no matter what came. And yet here he was, walking willingly into hands that might see him undone. The canyon opened at last into a hollow where the air grew cooler, the sound of water trickling faint in the distance. Ethan's boots scuffed stone, his horse trailing reluctant behind, ears twitching with unease. He kept his eyes forward, though he felt the weight of the woman's presence like a brand. "What do they call you?" he asked, voice low. She did not look back. "Names are given, not asked." He smirked despite himself, though the tension never left his shoulders. "Fair enough." They reached a narrow bridge of stone arched across a drop, so sheer Ethan could not see the bottom. The woman stepped lightly, without hesitation. Ethan lingered at the edge, staring into the yawning dark. The wind rushed up like a whisper from the earth itself, cold and ancient. She turned, her expression unreadable. "If you fear the bridge, you will fear what comes after." Ethan's jaw tightened. Pride carried him forward. He stepped onto the bridge, boots striking stone that felt far too narrow. The horse balked, nearly pulling him back, but he coaxed it forward with a firm hand. The crossing seemed to last an eternity, each step scraping at his nerves. When he reached the other side, the woman was waiting. For the first time since she had appeared, she studied him not as prey, but as something less certain. Her eyes flickered. Was it doubt or something else? "You carry weight," she said quietly. "Not only on your shoulders. The land can feel it." Ethan stiffened. He thought of his dead wife again, of the empty ranch house, of the ache that had driven him onward without rest. But he did not speak it aloud. He had no reason to bare himself to this woman. Not yet. She turned sharply, leading him toward the shadows of trees that clustered near the canyon's far side. A faint light glowed beyond, a campfire, voices in the distance. The sound of drums carried low, steady like the beat of a heart. Ethan knew then that he was being delivered, step by step, into judgment. And though he had faced outlaws, storms, and the hard hand of loss, the thought struck him cold. Nothing he had endured before prepared him for this. The woman's voice cut through the gathering night, certain as the stone around them. "You will answer to them. And then, rancher, you will see if the land lets you leave alive." The campfire's glow painted the trees in trembling light, shadows twisting across the earth like restless spirits. Ethan Cole felt the air thicken with suspicion as he stepped into the Apache encampment. Drums thudded low, steady as the pulse of the land itself. Men rose from the fire circles. Women drew their children back, and silence gathered sharp as a blade. He kept his chin level, though he could feel the weight of every gaze. His horse tugged nervously at the reins, but Ethan stood firm. He had walked into saloons filled with outlaws ready to spill blood. But this was different. There was no drunken noise here, no careless laughter. Every man who watched him could end him with one motion. The woman, Ayoka, he finally learned as her name passed low among the people, walked ahead, bow in hand, unbending in the firelight. She led him to the largest circle, where an elder sat upon a carved stone, robes of deer hide draped over his shoulders. His hair was silver, his face cut deep by years, his eyes black as obsidian. He was a chief, and the silence bowed to him. Ayoka spoke in her tongue, her voice clipped, commanding. Ethan caught fragments of meaning. Stranger, trespass, sacred. Every word seemed to stir the men around the fire like coals poked a flame. Some murmured darkly, hands tightening on knives. The chief raised one palm, and silence returned. Then his gaze shifted to Ethan. "You ride into sacred ground," the chief said in careful English, his tone heavy with the gravity of stone. "The land does not belong to you. Why do you come?" Ethan took in a breath, his throat dry. "Lost cattle. That's all. I followed tracks. Didn't know where they'd lead." A hiss of disapproval rippled through the crowd. A man stepped forward. Scar slashed across his cheek, spear clutched tight. He barked words at the chief, eyes locked on Ethan like a wolf sighting prey. The chief listened, then nodded once. His gaze sharpened. "This man says you are a liar, that you come as scout to bring soldiers after." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That ain't true. I came alone." The scarred warrior snarled something sharp, and Ethan caught the word death even through the foreign tongue. Ayoka cut in swiftly, her voice rising like a whip crack. She stood between Ethan and the warrior, her bow lifted though no arrow was nocked. Her words spilled fast, firm, her body taut with defiance. The crowd stirred uneasily. The chief let her speak, then raised his hand again. His gaze turned back to Ethan, and for a moment the air held still. "You live tonight," the chief said slowly, "but not free. You will prove. If the spirits accept you, you walk away. If not," his hand dropped to the earth, "final. The ground will take you." They stripped him of his revolver and knife, leaving only his coat against the desert night. Warriors led him beyond the campfires, into the canyon where shadows clung close and the cold gnawed bone deep. They left him at a ridge. Spears pointed toward the stone basin below. One man spat at his feet. Another hissed words Ethan could not know, but the meaning was plain. If he failed, no one would weep. Ethan descended into the basin, the moon climbing high overhead. The canyon was silent, except for the groan of wind funneling between stone walls. His breath steamed in the chill. Every sound seemed too loud, each crunch of gravel, each brush of his boots against stone. He searched the basin, his eyes sweeping for danger. Rocks towered like silent sentries. He thought again of his cattle, of the ranch waiting empty. But more than that, he thought of his wife's grave, the wooden cross weathering on that lonely hill. He had sworn to her memory he'd keep going, no matter what. If the land wanted to break him tonight, it would have to fight. A rustle stirred the brush. He turned sharply. Two yellow eyes glinted in the dark. The mountain lion leapt. Ethan dove, rolling hard against stone. Claws raked where he had stood. The beast landed, tail lashing, teeth gleaming white. He scrambled to his feet, heart hammering, the taste of copper in his mouth. The cat prowled low, muscles coiled. Ethan seized a fallen branch, jagged and thick, gripping it like a spear. The lion snarled, a sound that split the silence. It sprang again. Ethan thrust upward, the branch catching it in the chest. The weight crashed into the ground, claws tearing his sleeve. He shoved with every ounce of strength, wood pressing into fur, his arms trembling under the force. The lion thrashed, snapping teeth inches from his throat. A sharp cry split the night. The beast jolted, an arrow shaft buried deep in its flank. It hissed, sprang back, and vanished into the dark with a furious snarl. Ethan lay gasping, sweat freezing on his brow, blood running warm along his arm. He lifted his head. On the ridge above, Ayoka stood with bow in hand, shadow framed in moonlight. She met his gaze, unreadable, then vanished back into the dark. Ethan pulled himself upright, clutching the torn sleeve at his arm. He stared into the empty basin where silence had returned. His chest heaved, but his lips curved in a grim smile. He was still standing. And tomorrow, when the tribe looked into his eyes, they would see a man who had walked through death's shadow and come back whole. Dawn broke with a smell of smoke. Ethan was dragged back into camp at first light, bloodied but alive. Murmurs rose among the people as they saw the claw marks slashed across his arm, the torn coat, the grim fire still burning in his eyes. Some pointed, whispering to one another. Others spat on the ground. The chief studied him in silence, then nodded once. "The spirits let you live. We will see what you do with life." Ethan thought he'd earned a measure of breathing room, but the day had its own plans. The attack came swift before noon. The thunder of hooves, the crack of rifles, the screaming cry of raiders rushing in. Men shouted, children shrieked, women pulled the young toward cover. Raiders stormed into the camp, white men in dust-stained coats, rifles firing, eyes wild with hunger for blood and plunder. Ethan dove as a shot cracked past his ear. His instincts roared awake. He seized a fallen weapon from the ground. A hatchet dropped in panic and charged. The air filled with chaos, smoke and gunfire, the metallic stench of blood. Warriors clashed with raiders, arrows and bullets cutting the air. Ethan swung the hatchet hard, catching a raider in the shoulder. The man crumpled with a howl. Ethan turned, scanning for Ayoka. He spotted her near the fires, bow snapping string after string, arrows bearing into the raiders with lethal precision. But she was outnumbered, 2 riders closing fast. "Damn it," Ethan growled. He sprinted, hatchet raised, cutting across the chaos. One rider aimed a rifle down at her. Ethan hurled the hatchet with every ounce of strength. It spun end over end, striking the man square in the chest. He toppled from his saddle, the rifle clattering aside. The second rider bore down. Ayoka loosed an arrow, clean through his throat. He toppled, choking. Their eyes met across the frenzy, and for a heartbeat, something passed between them. Not gratitude, not yet trust, but recognition. A child screamed. Ethan turned to see a young boy dragged by one raider toward the canyon edge. Without thought, Ethan charged. He hit the man full force, the rifle discharging skyward. They tumbled into the dust, fists slamming, teeth bared. Ethan wrestled the weapon free and struck hard. The raider dropped, lifeless. The boy scrambled away, wide-eyed. When at last the dust settled, smoke rising over broken bodies, the tribe gathered in silence. Their dead lay among them, but so too did the raiders. And in the center stood Ethan, bloodied, weapon still in hand, chest heaving. The chief approached. His face bore no expression, but his words carried weight. "You fight with us, not against us. The spirits see." Ethan looked around. Faces once filled with suspicion, now shadowed by something else. Not acceptance, not yet, but the first crack in the wall of mistrust. Ayoka stepped forward. She bound the wound in his arm, her hands firm but careful. She said nothing at first, only tightened the cloth. Then quietly, "You saved the child." Ethan met her eyes. Seemed the right thing to do. Her gaze lingered unreadable before she stepped back. The drums began again that night. Not for judgment this time, but for mourning. Yet beneath the sorrow, there ran another rhythm, quieter but strong. The sound of a new thread being woven against the will of both fate and tradition. And Ethan knew then that his fight was no longer just to leave alive. It was to walk a path he had never imagined, one that would change not only his life, but hers. The night was colder than the desert should have been, as if the land itself held its breath. The rancher, Eli Barrett, kept his hand on the worn leather grip of his Colt, his eyes fixed on the glow ahead. Firelight flickered between the black shapes of mesquite, bending like restless spirits in the wind. Beyond that glow lay the encampment of the Apache band. He had never meant to cross, but had crossed all the same. He could smell smoke before he saw the blaze. Dry pinyon crackled, sparks darting skyward like angry insects. Shadows of warriors danced in sharp relief, their silhouettes twisting long and menacing against the flame. The air pulsed with a steady thrum of drums, low and unyielding, a heartbeat of the land itself. At the center of it all stood her, nature's daughter, Taya. No rifle in hand now, no hard set of her jaw. Her presence was more commanding than steel. She stood straight, a deer-hide cloak about her shoulders, her eyes reflecting the fire with both fury and sorrow. She was the one who had spared him before, the one who had bound his wounds, yet the one who would decide if he walked out of this circle alive. Eli's boots sank in soft sand as he stepped forward, each grain seeming to hiss under his weight. He felt every stare sharpen upon him, an intruder, an enemy, a fool. And yet, when his gaze found hers, he sensed something more. Taya lifted her hand, silencing the drums. The hush that followed was heavier than the beat itself. "You crossed where you had no right," she said, her voice low but carrying. "You carried iron onto land meant to rest undisturbed." Her words bit deeper than any blade. Eli tipped his hat back, his jaw tight. "I came with no war in me," he said. "A man can lose his way. A man can stumble where he ought not tread." The warriors closed in, their spears gleaming, their faces painted with the symbols of judgment. Eli's heart hammered, though he forced his stance to remain steady. He wasn't about to beg, not here, not in front of her. Then Taya stepped closer, so near he could see the scar across her palm, a mark of fire burned long ago. "Do you think your mistake costs nothing?" she asked. "The bones beneath that land belong to my people. The creek you watered your horse from is sacred. To take from it is to wound us all." Eli swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. What's a man to do when thirst takes him? Die in the sand instead of drink. Her eyes narrowed, firelight turning them gold. For a moment, no sound but the hiss of the wood, and the restless snort of Eli's horse behind him. Then Taya spoke again, softer but cutting sharper. "It is not your thirst I weigh. It is whether you can carry the burden of the land you touched." Something in him shifted then, an understanding creeping in like dawn over ridges. He hadn't come here to rob them, hadn't meant insult, but his survival had cost him something he had never bothered to see. And maybe that ignorance was its own crime. A sudden shout broke the moment. From the shadows, another warrior strode forward. Keshto, scarred across the cheek, his eyes burning with old hatred. Why waste words? Keshto spat. "This one brings nothing but blood. I say he dies and his horse with him." The circle grew tighter. Eli's hand brushed above his gun, though he knew he'd never outdraw them all. His fate hung by a thread finer than a spider's web, and Taya was the only one who could keep it from snapping. She turned, her cloak swirling, her voice ringing out like a blade striking stone. "Enough! This man is mine to judge. My father's word gave me that right." The warriors froze. Some scowled, others muttered under breath, but none stepped against her. Taya faced Eli again. "You will not die tonight," she said, "but if you wish to walk away, you will prove you deserve it." "How?" Eli asked, his voice rough. "You will ride with me," she said, "to the ridge where the earth split and the spirits dwell. You will face what waits there, and if you falter, the land will claim you." The drums resumed, steady, final. Eli gave a slow nod. "Then I reckon I'll ride." And in that moment, the fire threw their shadows long together, as if fate itself had bound them tighter than any rope. The ridge rose jagged and cruel against the paling sky, a crown of stone at the edge of the desert. Dawn spilled pale light across the land, painting the rocks blood red, as if foretelling what might come. Eli rode beside Taya, silence stretching between them, the weight of unspoken truths pressing heavy. Behind, Keshto and two others followed, watchful, eager for him to stumble. The horses snorted clouds of steam in the chill, hooves scraping against stone. The climb was merciless. Rocks tore the hooves, dust choked the air, and every step felt like climbing into the jaws of judgment. When they finally reached the top, the world spread wide below them. Endless desert rolling into haze, mountains clawing at the sky. But it was the ground at their feet that mattered. A great fissure split the ridge, dark and yawning, as if the earth itself had been torn apart. Bones lay scattered near its edge, buffalo, deer, and some too human to mistake. The air here carried a weight, a hum that prickled the skin. Eli felt his stomach tighten. This was no ordinary place. Taya dismounted, motioning him to do the same. "This is where our ancestors rest," she said, "where the earth swallowed the warriors who felt protected. Their spirits guard the land still. If you have no truth in you, they will know it." Keshto sneered. "Let him step close. The spirits will tear him apart." Eli's boots hit the stone with a dull thud. He wiped sweat from his brow, though the morning was cool. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to leave this place of bones and silence. But he didn't. He walked to the edge. The fissure breathed cold air, smelling of damp earth and something older, something that whispered against the skin like unseen fingers. Eli swallowed, then dropped to one knee. His voice, when it came, was raw. "I never came here to mock the dead," he said. "I came lost, near dying, and I took what I needed to live. If that wrongs you, then I'll carry it. But I'll not stand here and lie. A man don't choose where thirst finds him." The wind stirred low and mournful. Pebbles tumbled into the dark gap below. For a moment, nothing. Then a hawk shrieked overhead, wheeling in tight circles. Taya stepped forward, her eyes searching his face. What she saw there seemed to weigh heavier than his words alone. "The spirits do not demand perfection," she said, almost to herself. "Only respect. Only truth." Kesto growled, unsatisfied. "This is weakness. He should bleed for what he's done." But before more could be said, the ground shuddered. Faint, but enough to silence every voice. Dust rose from the fissure, curling like smoke. Eli felt it deep in his bones. It was not anger he sensed, but warning, a reminder of the fragile line between the living and the lost. Taya turned to Kesto, her voice unshakable. "The land has spoken. He stays." The warrior's eyes burned, but he said no more. Eli exhaled, relief mingling with awe. His gaze met Taya's, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, respect, maybe something more. He knew then that his crossing had not been accident alone, but a step into a fate he hadn't sought, yet couldn't turn from. As they mounted to descend, the sun broke full across the ridge, casting light into the fissure, onto the bones, onto the faces of the living. And in that light, Eli Barrett rode not as an intruder, but as a man marked by the land itself.